We think you'll be fine. On your own. That's what my mother said, without looking at me, still pulling her suitcase across the garage floor like everything had already been decided a long time ago. In that moment, I stopped being a daughter and became someone who had wandered onto a stranger's driveway. The screen door swung shut behind her, sunlight stretching across the porch tiles, and my entire family, each holding a suitcase, beach towels, a cooler, passports in hand, was getting ready to fly to Maui. The dream vacation. Sunshine, ocean, chilled white wine. And apparently, they didn't need me. The only thing they were missing was the credit card with my name on it, the same card I had loaned them a few weeks ago just to hold the reservation because online booking is really urgent. Welcome to Family Ashes, where secrets get peeled back in layers, and the things you thought were unbreakable, like family, slowly rot into dust. What would you do if one day, you were cut from a family plan, not because you were late, not because you didn't contribute, but simply because your presence made things a little less comfortable? Would you back down, stay quiet, try to understand their side? Or would you show them what it feels like to be the one standing outside? If you've ever been the one left out, not because of a mistake, but because you weren't easy enough to keep around, like this video, subscribe to Family Ashes, and share your story. Because maybe, just maybe, you're not the only one who's been pushed away from a dinner table in your own home. My name is Natalie Brooks. I'm 36, living in Santa Fe, New Mexico. My apartment is off Canyon Road, where the morning sun cuts through the kitchen window and the afternoon wind whistles down from the mountains, making the oak trees in front rattle like tired old bones. I'm a data analyst for a health insurance company, remote work, lots of spreadsheets, very few people. Just the way I like it, quiet, no small talk, no one hovering behind me watching my screen. I've lived alone since my divorce 3 years ago. No kids, no pets, just a few snake plants I forget to water. My life is steady, tidy, and most of the time, I'm fine. My family's the opposite. They thrive on noise. Constant group chats, weekend BBQs, watching basketball games together. My mother, Elaine, is the kind of woman who can flash a brilliant smile while quietly locking the door behind you. My dad, Peter, is quiet, but not the peaceful kind of quiet. He's the let's not talk about it kind. My sister Haley is 33, a skincare influencer who preaches positivity from a kitchen that's always flooded with studio light. She's married to Tyler, the endlessly polite, always agreeable type, the kind of man who's so neutral, you're never really sure whose side he's on. Last month, my mom messaged me that the family was planning a trip to Maui. A vacation to bring us closer together, she wrote, along with a smiling pineapple emoji. I asked, should I book anything? She said, don't worry. Nothing's final yet. A week passed. Then another. I followed up, asking how much I should chip in. Same reply, still deciding. But I started noticing little signs. Haley posted a story showing off a new bikini. Dad called asking to borrow my credit card to hold a hotel spot. Mom sent a photo of the beach with a caption, getting close. I still didn't know if I was actually part of the plan. And slowly, I started to feel like I already knew the answer, no one had to say it out loud. 1 week before the trip, that silence I've known for years came back. The kind of silence that doesn't come from forgetfulness, it comes from a decision. A choice. No one mentioned the vacation anymore. No one asked what I wanted to eat in Maui. No shared Excel file dividing up rooms. No coconut emojis. No one asked if I'd taken time off work. I texted my mom, short, neutral, no sarcasm, hey mom, has everyone booked their flights? Do I need to send over my share? She replied 11 hours later, maybe you should sit this one out. Haley's been really tense lately. We don't want to add stress. I must have read that sentence at least 10 times, each time slower than the last, and each time, another old layer of meaning peeled back. There wasn't a single direct rejection in those words, but there was nothing left to misinterpret. We, a group I used to think I belonged to. Don't want to add stress, the stress, apparently, was me. The way she wrote it was like always, polite on the surface, but if you looked closely, everything had been weighed and measured so that no one had to take responsibility for pushing me out. They were just doing what's best for everyone. I knew these signals well. I grew up with them. I knew the parties I wasn't told about. The side group chats I was never in. The promises of next time that never came. But this time felt different. This wasn't just a weekend dinner. This was a week-long vacation, a post-COVID family bonding trip, as they called it, something I had genuinely believed I was a part of. I had contributed my credit card to hold the reservation. I'd sent my mom a picture of a new swimsuit I'd bought. I asked Haley if she was bringing an air freshener because I'm sensitive to humidity. I even timed my prescription refill to align with the travel dates. And now, I was being told to stay behind. Like a tenant who gets a casual text saying they're not needed at the board meeting because it doesn't concern them. It took me hours to steady myself. After that, I didn't reply. I didn't argue. I didn't start a fight. I just packed a light backpack, filled my gas tank, and drove more than 300 miles from Santa Fe to Albuquerque. I had no plan except to show up and look them in the eye. Not to demand to come along. I didn't need to be reinvited. I just wanted to see if they had enough courage to say it clearly, or if they'd once again hide behind that old mask of politeness. The whole drive, I didn't play music. I didn't need to hear anything else. My head was already full of conversations that never happened. I thought about every question I'd ask if I had the chance. Why me? Since when did I become the unnecessary one? Is it because I got divorced? Because I don't fake agreement just to keep the peace? Because I don't post breakfast selfies with captions like blessed? Or is it simply because I'm not Haley? When I arrived, it was late afternoon. The New Mexico sun was still harsh, but no longer angry. Light stretched across the concrete driveway of my parents' house, the same spot where I'd learned to ride a bike, where I once cracked my front tooth. I parked in the exact place I used to on holidays, birthdays, so-called family gatherings. The garage door was open. Dad's SUV was parked neatly, trunk already open. A silver suitcase sat on the ground, next to a cooler leaking melted ice. I saw my mother's silhouette moving past the kitchen window, phone in hand, mumbling something under her breath. Haley stood at the entry mirror, adjusting the tie of her bikini top behind her neck. Tyler, as always, was hauling bags. He said something to Haley that made her laugh. Everything looked too perfect. Too quiet. Too normal. Like I had never been part of it. I walked up the front steps and knocked, 3 times, on the wooden door I knew better than my own reflection. The sound echoed, soft but certain. The door opened after about 10 seconds. My mom stood there. No makeup. White cotton shirt. High-waisted pants. The faint smell of her lavender rain fabric spray hung in the air, the same scent I'd always hated. She didn't look surprised. Or confused. Or flustered. Her eyes were still. Almost prepared. As if she had expected this. As if she had hoped I wouldn't come, but wasn't shocked that I had. "We figured you'd be fine on your own," she said. No question about how far I'd driven. No asking if I'd eaten. No curiosity about why I'd shown up. No invitation to come in. I looked directly into her eyes. They didn't flinch, but they didn't welcome either. It was the kind of look you give to unexpected rain outside your window, not joyful, not angry, just mildly inconvenient. I looked inside. My dad was standing at the stove, back turned, stirring something in a pot that probably wasn't even on. Maybe it was a habit, maybe it was a way of hiding. Haley was sitting cross-legged on the couch, phone in hand, sunglasses perched on her head like she was just a few steps from the beach. Tyler passed behind my mom, saw me, gave a polite nod, and turned away immediately, as if that was the bare minimum gesture required. No one said, "Natalie." No one got up to hug me. No one looked surprised. They knew I would come. They just hoped I wouldn't. And when I did, they chose to pretend nothing out of the ordinary had happened. I stood there, feet still on the worn-out doormat. I didn't step in. No one made room. No one said, we should talk. No one said, maybe I made a mistake. They didn't need to slam the door in my face. They just didn't open it all the way. And that was enough for me to understand. I wasn't part of the plan. Not an oversight, deliberate. They didn't need me, for Haley to feel more comfortable, for the trip to be more relaxing, for everyone to avoid facing the one thing that disturbed their carefully arranged peace. I turned around and left, quietly, just like I came. And on the drive back, there was only one sentence repeating itself in my head: none of them think they've done anything wrong. I didn't go home right away. After my mother gently closed the wooden door, not slammed, not locked, just nudged far enough to show me I wasn't meant to step inside, I returned to my car, opened the driver's door, and sat down like someone who had just failed at a negotiation that never had a seat for her to begin with. I didn't cry. I wasn't angry. The only feeling inside me was a strange kind of silence, like I just walked through a storm and somehow stayed dry, but my body was still cold on the inside. I turned on the AC just to give my hands something to do. I stared straight ahead. August sunlight poured through the windshield, across the steering wheel, over my legs, and onto the shadow of myself stretched across the floor mat. I sat there 10 minutes. Maybe 20. I didn't count. My mother's words kept replaying in my head, sweet in tone, hard as stone: you'll be fine. On your own. That sentence, wrapped like concern, was in truth a verdict. That I, alone, was the best version of this trip they could imagine. The drive back to Santa Fe didn't feel like the drive out. On the way there, I'd carried a small bit of hope that it was all a misunderstanding, that someone in my family would be brave enough to speak the truth, or kind enough to stop the charade. But now, there was nothing left to wait for. I drove like someone who had finally pulled the breathing tube out of her mouth, not hoping to be saved, just trying to swim to shore. By the time I got home, the sky was already dim. I didn't turn on the big lights. I stepped into my familiar apartment, took off my shoes by the door, poured a glass of cold water, and leaned on the kitchen sink staring out the window. The city was still loud, still lit, still unaware that someone had just been exiled from the place she used to call home. When my phone buzzed, I thought it was work. But no. A Zelle notification. From Elaine Brooks. Amount, $920. Note, share of villa and flight. I stared at the screen. Didn't look away for a full minute. It didn't feel shocking anymore. It felt absurd. A dark kind of humor that, if I told a stranger, they'd think I was making it up. My family didn't invite me. Then they billed me for the trip I was excluded from. A trip they said I shouldn't attend because my presence might cause tension. I let out a quiet laugh. Alone, in my cold kitchen, under yellow light pooling on the wood cabinets and peeling paint. I didn't text back. Didn't ask questions. Didn't lash out. I just reopened the Zelle app, typed in her account, entered the amount, exactly $1. In the notes section, I wrote, "You'll see me sooner than expected." No caps. No exclamation marks. No need. Just a simple, still sentence, like the surface of a lake, but if you listened closely, you'd hear the current starting to shift underneath. I sat down at the table and opened my laptop. Searched for the flight. I vaguely remembered the flight number Haley had mentioned during a video call, one she thought I wasn't listening to. I typed it in. It was the flight from Albuquerque to Maui, departing at 7:10 a.m. on Friday. Seats were still available. I picked first class. Not for luxury. But because I wanted to board before them, sit in a quiet section, and not have to jostle with anyone. I wanted peace, the kind of peace they thought they'd get by not having me there. I'd carry it with me, but in a form they couldn't control. After I received the ticket confirmation, I didn't stop. I opened another tab and looked for a resort. Not the one they booked. I wanted something different, more private, farther away, better. I chose a boutique resort, with standalone villas set apart from the main hotel area. It had a private path to the beach. A pool just for me. room service breakfast, and a balcony that faced the sunrise. I entered the booking under my name, Natalie Brooks. In the special requests section, I wrote, VIP guest. Requesting early check-in. Nearest possible room to the beach. Please have a chilled bottle of champagne waiting in the room. I reread the reservation details. Every word felt like it was written by a part of me that had never had a voice in the family. I wasn't doing this for revenge. I didn't even need them to know what I'd done. I just wanted a space where I wasn't the problem, the delay, the person who didn't match the vibe. A space where I was the one whose name was on the booking. The one who chose. The one who showed up without needing an invitation. And when I clicked confirm, I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel like I'd gotten back at anyone. I just felt light. As if, for the first time in years, I was sitting in the right seat in my own story, not the one left behind, not the one pleading to stay, but the one who knew exactly where she was going, and why she was there. No one needed to look at me. I didn't need to be seen anymore. But they would see. And this time, I wouldn't be standing outside the family photo. I'd be in the best light. And I'd be standing alone. But by choice. I arrived at the airport at exactly 4:17 a.m. Not because I was afraid of being late, but because I needed time to cross the space between decision and action. I needed to breathe in that anonymous air, where no one knew who I was, no one cared where I came from or where I was headed. I parked in the farthest lot, partly to avoid being noticed, partly so I could walk slowly along the entryway. Every step echoed the scuff of my old sneakers, the pair I hadn't worn in a long time. I deliberately didn't bring a rolling suitcase, just a light canvas bag slung across my shoulder, looking nothing like someone going on vacation. I wore a faded gray hoodie pulled low over my forehead. Oversized sunglasses, hiding most of my face. Hair tied up. Clothes unwrinkled, unremarkable. I looked more like someone finishing a graveyard shift than someone about to board a flight to paradise. The airport terminal was still half asleep. Fluorescent lights hanging from the ceiling cast a sterile glow on the shiny floor. Luggage carts rolled by slowly, metal clinking dryly in a space not yet filled with people. I walked in, scanned the flight board, on time, gate D17. I still had nearly 2 hours. Just enough to wait. And to observe. I picked a single chair in a shadowy corner near the water station and sat down. Leaned back slightly, hands in my lap, eyes hidden behind my glasses. I didn't check my phone. Didn't open my email. Didn't look at the time. I just sat there, quietly, like someone who's laid a trap that the prey doesn't know it's walking into. Around 6:15, I saw them. Haley came first, like always, leading, though no one asked her to. She pulled her familiar pastel suitcase, neck pillow in fuzzy pink looped around the handle, phone in her hand, already recording a story. Behind her came my mother, long beige coat, wide-brimmed hat, lipstick evenly spread. She wasn't dragging a suitcase, just holding her old Louis Vuitton handbag, the one she only used for special occasions. And finally, my father, back straight, clutching a folder of documents like he was still employed, even though he'd retired 5 years ago. They stopped at the check-in counter, where a young agent was focused on the computer screen. What happened next felt like a play I'd seen a dozen times, only now I was watching from the audience. My mother started talking, low voice, but firm. I couldn't hear her from this distance, but I recognized the rhythm of her mouth. It was the kind of speech that always carried the tone of "I'm not being difficult, but I am right." Haley crossed her arms, expression darkening, lips moving in short, angry bursts. My dad stood slightly apart, flipping through papers, probably printed boarding passes, flight confirmations, seat maps. Maybe they didn't get seats together. Maybe Haley's seat didn't have a window. Maybe Mom didn't want a middle seat. Little things, it seemed, but for them, it was enough to turn an ordinary morning into something unbearable. I sat less than 10 meters away. They didn't see me. I was sure of it. I had picked a seat with backlighting, shadows fell across my face, making me almost disappear. And I realized, this was the first time in my life I had seen them from the outside. Not from the corner I'd been pushed into. Not as the one trying to please. Not as someone trying to blend in. I just watched. And in that watching, I didn't feel left out anymore. I felt like someone who had quietly stepped out of the circle. When boarding started, I didn't rush. I waited for all the groups to go first class, priority guests, families with small children. I watched them walk through the gate. My mom was still checking the tickets, Haley bent down to adjust her sandal strap, my dad was saying something to the gate agent, his face slightly furrowed like something didn't sit right, but he didn't have the energy to change it. I pulled my hoodie lower, stood up, took the boarding pass from my pocket, and walked toward the gate. Last boarding group. No one noticed. No one called my name. I passed by the check-in counter like a shadow that didn't exist, and this time, I was okay with that. The plane was nearly full. I found my seat in the last row, by the window, next to an elderly woman dozing off with a book on her lap. I fastened my seatbelt, stowed my bag under the seat, then leaned against the cool wall of the plane. I didn't try to see where they were sitting. I didn't need to know. They had chosen not to see me. And now, I would let them live with that choice. I closed my eyes. Not to sleep. But to remember. This moment. The first time in my life I wasn't trying to be seen. And strangely, I saw myself more clearly than ever. I stepped off the plane at Kahului Airport at 9:12 a.m., along with hundreds of other passengers pouring out of the aircraft like fish spilling from a net. The sound of rolling suitcases echoed across the tile floors, announcements bounced off the high ceilings, soft-soled shoes tapping in a rush, all of it familiar, yet distant. This wasn't my first time in Hawaii, but it was the first time I arrived without anyone in my family knowing I was on the same flight. Or rather, on a parallel one. No talking. No looking. No existing in each other's eyes. I kept my distance. Didn't go near. Didn't let them see. I spotted my mother first, pulling her cream-colored suitcase with the American flag tag she'd used since our Europe trip in 2018. Same long coat, thin scarf, wide-brimmed hat. My dad still held his folder of travel documents, like he didn't trust his phone, like if he didn't have paper copies, the whole thing might fall apart. Haley, as always, stood out the most. Hair tied high, pastel neck pillow swinging from her suitcase, white linen dress fluttering with every step. I let them go ahead. I wasn't in a hurry. I had no one waiting, and no one needed to know I was here. As I exited the arrivals terminal, I saw the driver immediately. He held a small sign, neatly printed, Brooks family. I walked up, said nothing. Just nodded. He smiled softly, gave a respectful bow. Miss Brooks, your car is waiting just outside. Everything has been arranged per your request. I followed him out of the airport. The sunlight hit my face like a soft slap, blinding and warm. A sleek black SUV waited at the curb. Leather seats, air conditioning at a perfect level. On the seat, a neatly folded cold towel and a tray of tropical fruit, pineapple slices shaped like flowers, next to 2 chilled bottles of water and a thick envelope with my name on it. The ride from the airport to the resort took more than 30 minutes. Along the coast, distant mountain ranges blurred blue in the morning haze, rows of palm trees slid past the window like a slow-motion film. I didn't speak the whole way. Just looked out the window. Thought nothing. Needed nothing. Everything had already been arranged, as if I had rewritten the whole story, but changed the main character. From a background figure who barely appeared, to the only person who knew exactly what was happening. As the car turned onto the stone-paved path leading into the resort, I began to see the difference. This wasn't a place for large tour groups. No crying children. No banners advertising dinner buffets. No noisy bar music. Just quiet rows of trees, wide canopy flowers casting cool shadows across the walkway, and the near-silent footsteps of staff that barely touched the ground. I didn't need to check in at the front desk. A woman in a white blouse was already waiting in the lobby, tablet in hand. As soon as she saw me, she smiled. Miss Natalie Brooks. Everything has been prepared just as you requested. Your room is ready, the the champagne is chilled, and the jacuzzi is warming up. If you need anything else, please let us know. My suite was at the end of the private section, nearly right on the shore. No guests on either side. The door opened with a key card, slid open light as breath. I stepped inside, and for the first time since I left my mother's house, I felt my chest actually release. The room was bright, airy, natural wood with whites and beige tones. On the table, a vase of yellow orchids stood in clear glass. The floor-to-ceiling window opened onto a large balcony where morning light poured in like a stream of water. In front of me was the sea, deep blue, stretching wide, no barriers, no noise between me and the horizon. I took off my shoes, walked barefoot across the wooden floor, and stepped out onto the balcony. The jacuzzi was softly steaming. The champagne in the ice bucket had already been opened, 2 glass flutes set neatly on the small round table. I didn't rush to drink. I just stood there, hand resting on the railing, letting the ocean wind blow back into my face, salty, cool, and unapologetic. I checked the time. By now, they must have arrived. I opened my phone. One message from my mother. There's a problem with the booking. Do you know anything about this? I set the phone down on the table, didn't reply. I knew they were at the front desk of the other resort, the one I had once imagined we'd all be staying at. I knew they were saying the name Brooks with their usual certainty. And I also knew the staff would look at the system and say, the name Brooks has already checked in this morning. VIP room. No duplicate record under that name. I pictured my mother's face hearing that. Slight head tilt, narrowed eyes, lips pressed tight. Haley would snap, demanding to speak with a manager. My dad would step back, pull out his phone, trying to find the original booking. And eventually, they'd be assigned whatever was left, a standard room, ground floor, next to the tennis courts, beside the golf cart loading zone, no view, no balcony, just the sharp scent of disinfectant in a window facing the parking lot. I didn't feel happy. Didn't feel smug. Didn't feel like I'd gotten revenge. I just felt right. Everything, finally, in the right place. I wasn't outside anymore. I wasn't waiting for an invitation. I wasn't the supporting character. I was here, no one pushed me out, no one pulled me back in. Just me. And the ocean. And a half-opened bottle of champagne, fizzing gently as if it, too, was listening. For the first time, I was truly quiet. And didn't feel empty. The first message came around 11 a.m., while I was lying on a lounge chair under the awning, eyes half closed, the soft sound of waves lapping against the shore whispering me into a dream no one else could enter. My phone buzzed faintly, screen lit up. The words clear, "What's going on with the booking?" From my mother. I didn't open it. Let the screen stay lit for a moment, then turned the phone face down on the wooden table beside a cold glass of water. The glass tapping would make a soft sound, just enough to remind myself, don't pull yourself back in. The second message came not long after. What are you doing? Again from my mother. Then another one, this time from Haley. Did you book a hotel under the name Brooks? What is this? The questions came in short bursts, impatient, lacking even the bare courtesy they always prided themselves on teaching me, but never practiced when they were upset with me. I didn't read further. Didn't open the thread. I grabbed a towel, draped it over my eyes, leaned back into the chair, and let the breeze slip through the folds of my shirt, cooling my skin like water after a fever. I didn't care what they thought. Didn't want to know. Because for the first time, their emotions were no longer my responsibility. That afternoon, I went down to the beach. White sand, clear water, gentle sun. I walked along the shore, slipping off my shoes as I went, letting the sand work its way between my toes. Every step was slow. No one calling. No one waiting. No one rushing me. I stopped at a paddleboard rental stand, just planning to watch, but the woman at the counter smiled warmly and asked, "First time?" I nodded. Then joined those 2 ladies over there. They're solo travelers too. She pointed toward two women laughing softly at the water's edge, one with short, sun-kissed hair, the other taller, wearing sunglasses, tying her blonde hair up high. They saw me and waved. I waved back. It felt strange, as if I'd stepped into another story, lighter, freer, with no fixed roles. Their names were Sam and Lisa. Sam was from Minneapolis, a veterinarian. Lisa did interior design in San Diego. Both had recently canceled trips with boyfriends, one because of a breakup, the other because her boyfriend changed plans last minute. Neither seemed upset about it. They spoke as if those things had happened long ago, already smoothed over by time. We paddled out beyond the shoreline, sunlight glinting off the water like thousands of tiny mirrors. The waves weren't strong, just enough to make the boards gently sway in rhythm. We didn't talk much. Each of us kept enough distance not to get pulled into the other, but close enough that if one lost balance, the others could reach. I'd never felt so light, being around strangers without having to play a part. That evening, we met again at a beachside restaurant. The table had been reserved earlier. White wine already opened. It was a fusion-style place, not cheap, soft amber lighting spilling over polished wood floors, staff moving so quietly it seemed like their feet didn't touch the ground. I ordered a dish I can't remember the name of, just that it had mango and coconut, two ingredients I used to be told were too weird to order when you're eating with others. Sam told a story about a client who once brought in a parrot because it was depressed. Lisa talked about the open kitchens she had designed, spaces where people could cook and still see the sea. I didn't laugh too loud. I didn't act overly enthusiastic. I just felt comfortable. A kind of comfort that didn't need to be verified, didn't need to be reassured, didn't need anyone asking, "You're doing okay, right?" We walked back to the villa after dark. The air carried the scent of sea mixed with night-blooming flowers, the sand beneath our feet cool to the touch. They headed to their rooms, and I returned to my suite, opened the door and found everything exactly as I'd left it. The lights were soft. The scent of yellow orchids still lingered. On the table, my phone lay face down. The screen wasn't lit, but I knew there were messages waiting, maybe dozens. I didn't touch it. Not because I was afraid, but because I no longer felt the need to answer. I poured another glass of water, opened the balcony doors, sat on the long chair, and looked out toward the dark sea. Not waiting for anyone. Not hiding from anyone. Just listening. To a sound so quiet, it felt like myself, after years of noise, had finally learned how to be silent without feeling alone. That night, I hadn't planned to go anywhere. I had eaten dinner, taken a hot shower, poured myself a glass of wine, and read a few pages of a book on the balcony. But somehow, I got up, changed into long pants, threw on a light jacket, and walked in the direction of the old resort. Maybe it was the change in the wind. Maybe it was something inside me humming, faint, like a guitar string pulled too tight. Maybe it was because I had never dared to look back at the place I might have stayed, had I remained the kind of agreeable person they needed me to be. I passed over stone paths, alongside tall green palms, under a few yellow street lamps, my footsteps slow, soft, uncertain. It was late. The moon was high, full and bright, enough that I didn't need to turn on my phone. I knew what I was doing, even if I hadn't planned for it. I saw him there, from a distance. Tyler. Sitting alone, on the low seawall near the water's edge. No Haley. No one else. His elbows rested on his knees, one hand holding a beer can, the silver reflecting moonlight like some strange object in the hands of a man trying to get used to silence. I stopped in the shadows, hesitated. I could have turned around. Could have walked past. But I didn't want to miss the moment where I could see part of the story from someone in the middle, not a victim, not a villain. I stepped forward, letting my footsteps be just loud enough not to surprise him. When he looked up, he didn't seem startled. Just looked at me quietly. Then raised his beer can like a silent greeting. I sat down beside him. Not close. But close enough that it couldn't be mistaken for coincidence. We sat like that for a long time, saying nothing. Ocean wind swept through my hair, through his, carrying salt and a touch of moisture. The waves lapped below us, steady, like the heartbeat of something very old, slowly bleeding out. "This place is quieter," Tyler said, still not looking at me, his eyes fixed on the sea. I didn't respond. There was no need to. He was right, it was quieter. No accusations. No tears. No one acting in that same family play where everyone knows the script but no one dares change it. After a while, he sighed, took a sip of beer, and finally spoke. "You didn't know it was Haley's idea, did you?" His voice carried no challenge. Just a quiet admission, like it was time someone said it. "She told Mom that if you came, everything would get tense. You and her haven't been getting along. Mom just wanted to keep the peace. Dad didn't say anything. But, you know him. If he doesn't object, that means he agrees." I turned to look at him, but he didn't look back. The moonlight lit one side of his face, and in that moment, I realized he was tired. Not of me, but of standing too long between people who always claim to be choosing what's best for everyone. Haley said something like, "She'll understand. She always does. Natalie's not the type to make a fuss." And they believed it. Believed you'd step back. Like always. I stayed silent. Not angry. Not hurt. The feeling was like hearing a prophecy you knew was coming, just didn't expect to hear in someone else's voice. I watched the water, didn't react. There was no need. Everything was already clear. "I used to step back," I said, slowly, my voice calm, like I was reading a chapter of my own life. "But that was the old Natalie." The words dropped like a pebble into the water, not loud, but deep enough to send a ripple far beneath the surface. Tyler didn't respond. Maybe he didn't know what to say. Maybe he understood what I'd said wasn't about blame or reclaiming fairness. It was just a confirmation. I no longer stood where they'd gotten used to seeing me. "Haley thought you'd cry," he said, as if offering one last piece of the puzzle. "She said, she'll be mad. Then she'll go quiet. Like always." He exhaled. "But you didn't get mad. You didn't go quiet. You disappeared. And not the kind of disappearance people forget. The kind they feel." I said nothing more. I didn't need to. He'd seen. They'd all seen. I stood up after a long silence, brushed the sand off my dress. The wind had picked up. The moon was still high. Tyler looked up, met my eyes for the first time. There was no pleading in his gaze. No defense. Just someone who knew things had gone beyond his reach. "They'll come back around. When you're home. Messages. Calls. Maybe blame you. Maybe pretend it's no big deal." He said it like someone who'd seen the cycle too many times. "They'll say you overreacted. That you broke things. That you changed." I nodded, not smiling. "I know." Then I turned and walked away. And in the sound of the waves behind me, I heard the thing I'd spent years avoiding. I had never been chosen. I had only ever been accepted when I behaved. And now, there was nothing left to behave for. Only me, walking away, not waiting to be called back. And that feeling, it wasn't light. But it was real. That morning, the sun rose quickly. The sky was a defiantly clear blue, no clouds, no softness, as if nature, too, was playing the same everything's fine act my family always tried to maintain. I woke up without an alarm, stepped out onto the balcony with the cocktail I'd made the night before. The ice had mostly melted, leaving just a few cubes rolling around like unfinished sentences. The waves kept their rhythm, birds chirped from the trees behind the villa, and the air still carried the sweet scent of ripe pineapple and sea salt. But my phone, the only thing that refused silence, started buzzing. A call from Mom. Then a second. Then a third. Before I could silence it, my dad's number lit up. Then Haley's. Then an unknown number. Then back to Mom. Again and again, non-stop, like a slow but persistent attack. I didn't answer. I didn't need to. I already knew what they'd say. I'd heard it all my life, just phrased in different ways, that I was overreacting, that I was the one making things messy, that I was always the one disturbing the peace. I muted the phone and placed it face down on the wooden table, beside my cocktail. The cold glass touched the drywood with a soft knock, like someone tapping gently at a door. But this time, I didn't answer. Less than an hour later, my inbox exploded. First came an email from my mother, subject line, "Please respond immediately." Inside, 3 paragraphs, each sentence so carefully chosen it felt artificial. "The family has endured a great deal because of your behavior. You need to understand the consequences of breaking boundaries. We may need legal intervention if you continue down this path." I read every line, not angry. The only thing I felt was surprise, not because they said it, but because I once believed they wouldn't go this far. Then came my father's email. Shorter, but no less distant. "We've tried to understand you, but your current behavior is beyond what we can tolerate. Requesting damages is not a threat, it's a necessity." I sat on the balcony, feet propped up on the railing, wind in my hair, reading that email like it was a service agreement. Every sentence smooth, emotionless, written as if I were a troublesome customer, not the daughter who had once paid off his credit card debt 3 years ago without saying a word. Haley didn't write a letter. She sent a link to a PDF, list of damages and reimbursement request. The subject line read like a utility bill. Contents: $2,400 for economy airfare, non-refundable hotel costs, and the rest. Emotional damages, clearly listed in parentheses, unable to sleep for 3 nights, feelings of humiliation in front of resort staff. I didn't know whether to laugh or feel pity. All of it, as if I were a storm that blew through and ruined the perfect painting they'd spent a lifetime painting. I didn't reply. Not a single line. No explanation. I had explained enough. I tried to keep the peace, be the bigger person, not take it personally, try to understand. But turns out, the more silent I was, the more they believed I was someone easy to push aside. The more understanding I became, the more they felt I was the one worth eliminating. Now there was no more understanding. I no longer kept the door open for people who never entered with their whole hearts. I blocked them all. Every number. Every email. Not out of rage. But with a silence so complete, even I was surprised by how calm I could be while closing the door on my entire family. I knew, if I left even one channel open, they'd find a way to squeeze back in. They weren't used to being ignored. They'd never learned to stay quiet around someone they couldn't control. 2 days later, the front desk staff handed me a cream-colored envelope. Purple ink, my name written carefully on the front, Natalie. My mother's handwriting. That familiar slant, precise like the letters she used to type as an admin secretary at the elementary school. I didn't open it. I didn't need to read it to know what it said. I could imagine every word. "You've embarrassed the whole family. Haley hasn't slept all week. People are looking at us with pity. Can you really live like this forever?" I brought it back to my room, poured myself a fresh cocktail. More pineapple, more ice, this time with a few thin slices of lime. I set the glass down on the table. Then placed the envelope next to it. Didn't cut it open. Didn't fold it. Didn't tear it. I just looked at it, like a letter from a past life. A life I had already left behind, with no need to look back. I wasn't angry. Wasn't hurt. Didn't feel victorious. There was only one unmistakable feeling, a strange, almost profound relief. As if I'd been carrying something on my shoulders for 3 decades, and only now had stopped to ask, why was I carrying it? Who made me keep it? I leaned back in the chair. The ocean breeze swept in, carrying the sound of waves and the scent of orchids in the air. I closed my eyes, one hand holding the cocktail, the other brushing the edge of the envelope, feeling the thick paper, real ink, and an entire old world trying to sneak its way back in. But I had locked the door. Not with bolts. Not with anger. but with a kind of clarity that no longer needed to be understood. The airport on the return afternoon was oddly quiet. Maybe because I arrived earlier than usual. Maybe because, after nearly a week of chosen silence, every sound around me felt excessive. I walked past the lines of people waiting to check in. Fluorescent lights casting down on the glossy tile floor made everything seem colder than it really was. I didn't carry much, just a tidy canvas bag over my shoulder, holding exactly what I brought with me, a few changes of clothes, a book I hadn't finished, and memories I no longer felt like sorting. I went through security. Everything went smoothly, as if nothing about me was worth noticing. The staff smiled, asked a few routine questions. I responded in a voice light as breath. Stepping out of the screening area, I looked up at the flight board, on time. No delays. No gate changes. No overlaps with other flights. Everything moved with a perfection, too perfect, for a day where I was about to face one final truth: they still didn't consider me part of them. I boarded the plane early. My business class ticket gave me priority, though I didn't need it. I just didn't want to be in the crowd. Didn't want to hear anyone call anyone else's name while walking down the aisle. I chose a window seat, on the wing, where I could lean my head and look out, with no one beside me. I brought headphones, not to play music, just to have a reason not to hear. I didn't bring a neck pillow, didn't need a blanket. I just needed space. Something so rare in my family, now easily found by staying quiet at the right moment. Once I was settled, seatbelt fastened, seat slightly reclined, I heard familiar footsteps. A bit of suitcase wheels rolling. Soft whispers trailing behind. I didn't turn around. But I knew. They were coming. My mother walked first, still carrying the old handbag she used to flaunt on holidays. Her hair slightly unkempt, no longer neatly styled. No makeup, or it had worn off. Her eyes, what I saw through the narrow aisle gap, were not searching. No hesitation. No effort to recognize me. Just a deliberate choice not to look. Haley followed, slower. The low-heeled sandals she once bragged feel like walking on clouds now dusty. Dark circles under her eyes. Neck pillow in her arms, no longer worn. She said nothing. Looked at no one. Just walked. Like a shadow who knew she'd lost a spot she once believed was permanent. Tyler was the quietest. Still the one pulling the suitcase. Still keeping distance. But this time, no one turned to thank him. No one asked for help. No one slung an arm around him like he was something to be claimed. They didn't talk to each other. They didn't talk to me. All three passed my seat, close enough that I could hear their breathing, smell the faint perfume lingering on Mom's blouse, hear the quiet clink of a zipper against the seat arm. No one paused. No eye contact. No greeting. Not the smallest sign that I was once blood. Everything, silent. Indifferent. Perfectly rehearsed. Just like how they'd learned to exist without me. I didn't move. Didn't breathe deep. Didn't clench my fists. I just sat there, looking out the window. The plane hadn't taken off yet, but I knew the line between me and them had already been drawn. Not by a fight. Not by a slammed door. But by a passing by so smooth, it was as if I had never been there at all. The flight lasted 6 hours. I didn't sleep. Didn't read. I just sat there, letting my body be held by the seat, by the pressurized air, by a quiet that felt very different, a kind of quiet that no longer hurt, only felt hollow. But a gentle kind of hollow. Like a room finally cleared after years of storing things no one ever used. When the plane landed, I let everyone else off first. I didn't want to stand near them. Didn't want to jostle memories. By the time I stepped out, they had already disappeared into the crowd. No one looked back. No one checked if I was behind them. No one asked. I left the airport, called a car, went home. Unlocked the door to my small apartment, turned on the kitchen light. Everything was exactly the same. The glass still sat askew on the table. The blanket still folded neatly at the foot of the sofa. The air hadn't changed. No one had come or gone. I stepped inside as if I'd just returned from somewhere, not to relive anything, but to continue living. I opened the calendar on my phone, tapped through each entry. Mom's birthday, delete. Thanksgiving, delete. Christmas, New Year's Day, my parents' wedding anniversary, Grandma's memorial, deleted, all of them. I didn't want to remember anymore. Didn't want to ask myself whether I should call, should text, should pretend everything was fine. I opened my messaging app, searched for the group Brooks United. Still there. The group photo was the same, our family, Thanksgiving a few years ago, me in the center, arms around Mom and Haley. I stared at it for a moment, then tapped the 3 dots. Selected, leave group. A confirmation message popped up. Are you sure you want to leave this group? I tapped yes. No fireworks. No dramatic collapse. Just one soft touch. And then, silence. I poured myself a glass of water. Not cold. No ice. Sat down on the couch, legs pulled up, eyes fixed on the kitchen, the place I used to cook dinner for family gatherings no one really remembered. I didn't feel loss. Didn't feel regret. I just felt one thing, that, finally, I placed a period. Not a final one. Just a full stop to a long, dragging sentence I should have ended long ago. And now, silence wasn't a punishment. It was space. It was a boundary. It was the right to step out without asking for permission. And I stepped out, with all the calm of someone who has finally stopped blaming herself for not fitting into a family that only knew how to love when you stayed quiet. I don't remember what day it was. I just remember the wind smelled like dry leaves and cold earth. A scent unique to the end of October, when fall begins to shed its last remnants onto the pavement, and everything around feels strangely still. I sat in the living room, the yellow lamp casting uneven shadows across the white wall. In my hands was a book I'd read several times but never managed to fully focus on. On the table, a steaming cup of tea, the scent of cinnamon blending with the dry ticks of the clock. Everything was quiet. So much so that I imagined if someone called my name just then, I wouldn't be able to respond. I'd drifted too far into the quiet. Then came a knock at the door. 3 knocks. Clear. Not rushed. Not hesitant. But not soft enough to be mistaken for the wind. I looked up. For a moment, I thought it could be a neighbor, or a delivery to the wrong address. I didn't think of family. I didn't think of them anymore, not at this hour. I walked to the door, didn't turn on the porch light. Only 2 people knew the exact position of the broken doorbell under the handle, me and Haley. I opened the door. And just as I thought, it was her. She stood there, body slightly folded inward like someone bracing to not be blown away. Hair messy, unbound, no makeup. Eyes dark, lips pale. She wore a long green coat, worn at the cuffs, the same one she used to wear in her sophomore year of college, the one Mom once said wasn't feminine, but she kept anyway. I think the last time I saw it was in an old winter photo taken at the park near our house. Almost 10 years ago. In her hand was a piece of paper. Folded into quarters. Thin, slightly wrinkled at the edges, as if it had been crumpled and then smoothed out again. No envelope. No tape. Just a bare sheet of paper, trembling in hands just as bare. I said nothing. Didn't invite her in. Didn't ask. She didn't speak right away either. Just looked at me for a few seconds. Then lifted the paper toward me. I just wanted to give it to you myself, she said. Her voice was hoarse and low, like someone who had just cried or stayed up all night. The words passed through the wind, not loud, but clear enough. I took it. Our hands didn't touch. She didn't linger. Didn't wait for me to read. Didn't ask for any reaction. After handing me the paper, Haley gave the faintest nod, like someone who's grown used to rejection, then turned, stepped off the porch, and disappeared into the dark. I stood there watching her walk down the narrow alley toward the main road. No glance back. No hesitation. I closed the door. Not hurriedly. Not gently. Just closed it. What had just happened, closed. In my hand, the paper still held a bit of warmth. I stepped back inside, the yellow light still soft, the wind slipping through the window crack, making the curtain sway. I unfolded the paper. A single line. Handwritten. Faint blue ink, so familiar I almost knew each stroke before finishing it. Just one line. If you leave, I understand. But I'm sorry. No date. No name. No punctuation. No explanation for everything that had happened. No attempt to cling. No playing the victim. No mention of how hard it had been after the trip. Just 6 words, thin, bare, and quietly desperate. I stared at that line for a long time. Then folded the paper back up, carefully, like someone folding an old letter that still carried the scent of a memory too strong to forget. I went to the kitchen, poured hot water into the cooled cup of tea, added a few slices of ginger. Then returned to the table, pulled out a chair, and sat down. I didn't put the paper away. Didn't crumple it. Didn't throw it out. I placed it flat on the table, neatly, beside the tea and the half-read book. As if it were a part of the house, a part of the evening, and a part of me, even though I no longer wanted to return to any place where the word sisterhood had been used to mask all the times I'd been hurt. I didn't feel as emotional as I thought I would. No lump in my throat. No joy. No new pain. The feeling came not like a wave, but like the sound of a pin dropping, tiny, sharp, but echoing far in a room that had been silent too long. I didn't know what I would do with that piece of paper. Maybe I'd tuck it into a drawer. Maybe I'd forget it inside a book someday. Or maybe one day, I'd open it again and feel nothing at all. But that night, I knew I didn't throw it away. And that alone was enough for something to begin softening. Not because I forgave, but because I no longer needed to resist. Once the pain had been named, even if too late, at least I didn't have to carry it alone anymore. What about you? Have you ever received an apology too late, just a short sentence, no explanation, no effort to make it right, and stood before it, unsure how to feel? Have you ever watched someone come back, long after everything inside you had frozen, holding nothing but a piece of paper, a few shaky words, and then disappear, leaving you alone with the decision, to keep it, or let it go? We grew up thinking forgiveness is noble. That it's the way to heal. But some wounds don't need healing. Some doors don't need to reopen. Some people come back, not to reconnect, but just to confirm that yes, they really did hurt you. And sometimes, that alone, is enough. Natalie didn't reply. Didn't cry. Didn't soften. She simply placed that paper on the table, in her own home, where every corner had been rebuilt with awareness, with chosen solitude, and with a self-respect she had reclaimed after years of living just to keep others comfortable. Maybe you've been like her, too. The one left out of the family photo. The one excluded from the trip, the dinner, the conversation you should have been part of. The one who had to step away to protect yourself, only to receive, long after, an apology with no voice. A hand that never touched. A sentence too small to start over. If that's you, leave a comment under this video. Tell Family Ashes the moment you realized, forgiveness isn't about going back. It's about not needing to stay anymore. And if you're still on that path, or never found the courage to step out, maybe, your story, you, could be the key that helps someone else break free from love that feels too much like self-erasure. Subscribe to the channel. Like the video if it speaks to you. And tell your story, because sometimes, telling it is the very first step toward not carrying it anymore. We're always listening. Even if only through a silence.